Olá, boa tarde a todos, sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Muito obrigada pela presença. Esse é um projeto da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas da Universidade Federal de Goiás, Reitoria Digital e Mississippi State University, com apoio da Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Rádio Universitária, Rádio Brasil Central FM e Centro de Estudos Brasileiros. Além de mim, na coordenação, fazem parte desse projeto Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yasbeck Seba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes. Doutora Rosângela Seba será a entrevistadora de hoje, que é a responsável pela parceria com a Mississippi State University. É chefe do departamento de piano dessa universidade e artista Steinway. Hoje, ela entrevistará Chris Boardman. Chris começou sua carreira na indústria de cinema, televisão e estúdio de gravação em 1974, recebeu uma indicação ao Oscar por The Color Purple, 6 prêmios Emmy, 3 indicações ao Emmy, prêmios de cinema The American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers e Broadcast Music Incorporation, e vários discos de platina por seu trabalho com artistas icônicos como Quincy Jones, David Foster, Steven Spielberg, Julie Andrews, Shirley MacLaine, Barbra Streisand, dentre vários outros. Boardman é um dos músicos mais versáteis e altamente respeitados da indústria musical. Também foi indicado 2 vezes para o prêmio de Mentor do Ano pela The Graduate School da Universidade de Miami. Bem conhecido nos círculos de Hollywood como um dos poucos músicos que podem escrever qualquer coisa, os créditos de Boardman abrangem tanto a indústria quanto o gênero, seja regendo Dia Mundial da Criança, de David Foster, para a televisão, compondo a trilha sonora inspirada nos anos 70 para Payback, de Mel Gibson, arranjando música de dança de época para Swing Kids e Meet Joe Black, ou locando e produzindo gravações solo. Como artista, Boardman abraça esses desafios com integridade e paixão. This is a project of the School of Music and Performing Arts of the Federal University of Goiás Digital Department and the Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for the Study of Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Rádio University, Rádio Brasil Central FM, and Center for Brazilian Studies. Besides me, in the coordinator, Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yasbeck Seba, Sérgio de Paiva, and Wesley de Menezes are part of this project. Dr. Rosângela Seba will be today's interviewer, who is responsible for the partnership with Mississippi State University, is the head of the piano department at that university, and the Steinway artist. Today, she will interview Chris Boardman. Sejam bem-vindos. Rosângela Seba and Chris Boardman, thank you very much. It's a big honor to be with you, Chris.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. We are now with Chris, and I am always very impressed with his music. In fact, I was his fan before I even knew Chris personally. I always enjoyed listening to film music, especially those that are really well written and arranged. So I always had a great admiration for good music. And there's no such thing as classical and pop music. There's good and bad, and that's about it. So I am forever thankful for Kathy Olson and Bob Olson for introducing us, because I've learned a lot from them and from Chris as well. So Chris, welcome to this interview. We're going to spend the next hour together, and we're going to talk about your music and music in general and the perspective of music in society and culture. So it's hard for me to start a conversation without even asking you. I know that you play the piano.
Yes, I do.
And and I'm going to say this, you always kind of chuckle a little bit when I say this, but you were a child prodigy at the piano.
That's what people tell me.
Well, tell more about that for us, please.
Well, it's been said, people have said that you didn't choose music, music chose you. And it all started in the 1950s. Tonsillectomies were very, very popular. And I had an older brother who had tonsillitis, and it was decided that my tonsils would get removed at the same time, even though my tonsils were fine. And the surgeon came back and told my parents that he discovered that my adenoids were growing abnormally into my inner ear, and that I would be totally deaf by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, with with such a gradual loss in hearing that by the time we noticed the hearing loss, there'd be nothing that could be done. 6 months later, my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I was going to be 4 years old, and I said I wanted a piano. So they rented a piano, and the piano came, and I sat down and started playing by ear little tunes that I knew, basically the day the piano arrived. And my father had hired a studio musician to come out and give me lessons, and he would play from the big red John Thompson book, and I would mimic whatever it was he played at me. But then he, like the second or third lesson, he pointed to the music and said, "Play this bar," and I looked at him and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. What does that mean?" So he suggested that not give me lessons until I went to school and I learned how to read. And so I started school and went to kindergarten, and we moved to a different house in a different neighborhood, and there was a woman up the street who taught beginning piano, and I started with her when I was 7. When I was 8 years old, I played the minute waltz at tempo, and the next year for my 8th grade, or eighth, when I was 8 years old, I played the Chopin Grand Waltz in E flat, top to bottom by memory, and then started working on the Chopin Ballade in A flat the next year. And then I kind of got bored, and the teacher came to my parents and said, I can't teach. There's nothing I can offer him. He's beyond me at age 9. So that's kind of how the beginning of me in the piano.
And did you read the music by then, or did you learn?
No, yeah. I learned how to read.
So sight reading wasn't a problem for you or anything?
Well, it always was kind of weird, sight reading. I always listened to what I played. And I found sight reading to be a very mechanical task. And I always never really felt comfortable sight reading, probably because I didn't do it enough. And to be honest, I relied on my ears for the most part. So it's not like I can't read. It's just, I know studio musicians who can play anything you put in front of them, but I just never did that enough to be able to feel comfortable.
It is a training. It is basically a training. You have to be trained.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, when I wanted to try and improve my sight reading, I came across, somebody told me to read measures diagonally across the page, and to read measures up and down, and then from bottom corner to upper right-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner, and play measures out of sequence to train your eyes to look in different places. So,
wow, that is something that I learn. I'm telling you, I learn every day.
There you go. It's kind of odd. It's kind of odd. It's not necessarily musical, but it certainly does train you to look forward, which was really the biggest hang up for me in terms of sight reading. I'm focusing on the sound of the notes that I'm playing at the moment and not looking ahead to what's coming next. So.
Yeah. So I'm always very impressed with musicians that can sit down and play anything, especially by ear, because for me to play by ear is kind of painful because I wasn't trained this way. And I was in fact prohibited to play by ear when I was growing up.
Oh, that's awful.
It is awful. Now I know that. So I'm also very impressed with people that can hear something and sit down and play. And to know that you have had that experience and then was then kind of taught from the traditional way. And now here you are as a composer, arranger, conductor, and all the above. And I just would like to go straight to your music and talk about your music, because as I said, I knew about your music. I enjoyed it, listening to it. And then, oh yeah, that's Chris Boardman. Oh yeah, that's the guy that I met. So I would like to talk about the experience that you had. What do you like the most, Chris? What do you like to compose, to arrange, what is your favorite thing to do?
Boy, I never know how to answer that question, because every day I'm a different person, and so my whims and my fancy kind of shifts from day to day. I spent an awful lot of years training myself to be a composer and an orchestrator, more of an orchestrator arranger than a composer. But it's honestly, I that's a really difficult question for me to answer, because to me, it's all just music. It doesn't matter if I'm doing jazz, if I'm doing pop, if I'm doing classical music, or if it's just whatever happens to be on the table at that particular moment. And my approach is, well, let me back up a little bit here. Being a really first-rate orchestrator means you have to focus your attention, even with composition as well as playing. But it's about focusing your attention with having no distractions, right? And so that kind of carries over into everything that I do now, into whatever it is I'm doing at the moment. I try to bring my complete attention to that, so that I can give it my best and be as in tune with the emotional context of what it is I'm doing.
When you are writing, because I say this to my students when I'm trying to ask them to produce different timbre from the piano or different sounds from the piano. It's not a matter of just pressing the note. I always tell them, if you hear Beethoven, especially the sonatas, it's clear that he had the orchestra in mind.
Absolutely.
Especially the minuets in sonata form, and in the sonata, the third movement or second movement. You can hear the string quartet right there.
Right.
Okay. And so when you're writing or when you're arranging, when you hear the music, do you hear the sound of the instruments? Or
it's the best performance you'll ever hear is the one in your head. And my mentor, a guy named Billy Byers, who was a trombone player, arranger, a legendary musician in New York and Los Angeles, he just made it. It was his preference to work writing and arranging away from a keyboard. And so there's an old phrase called "see with your ears and hear with your eyes."
Yeah.
Which basically means I was trained to sit at a desk and hear everything that I was writing. I mean, the most extreme example of that, I did that for 15 years, but in the early 80s, we did a show at Radio City Music Hall together, summer show. And we were camped out at the Hotel Edison off of Times Square. And I wrote the entire show, 3.5 weeks working on this project day in, day out, never once laying eyes on a piano. So if you have absolute pitch, great. If you have a highly developed relative pitch, then it's a learned skill to be able to hear the notes on paper. It's not magic. It's just, you just have to work at it.
Yeah, I teach ear training, and I get students that can barely read treble clef, but forget about listening to what they are hearing. And I usually start with putting words on the projector, and I say, just mentally read that. Can you hear the word in your ears? Oh, yeah. That's what we're going to learn.
I saw a video of the most amazing young woman who was maybe mid-20s, late 20s, who lost her hearing, and she was a singer-songwriter. And she memorized pitches by the way that it felt in her body. And when her neck, when her eyeball, when her cheek would vibrate, she would be able to identify what that pitch is.
Yeah,
it's just phenomenal. She couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, there is
honestly
a percussionist. There is one of the most famous percussionists right now. She's deaf. But she's extremely expressive, marimba especially. And when she plays, the dynamics are beautifully done. So they asked her, how are you able to know? And she said, by vibration. I can feel it. So she's very close to the marimba, and her body feels the vibration. And that's amazing.
You know, something that's really important to me, and when I was teaching, I tried to encourage my students with this idea. You know, this is a very complex task, learning how to orchestrate, how to compose, how to do it well. It takes years of dedicated effort. It's not something that you know, the singer-songwriters, they, you know, not to diminish them at all, but it's much more of a visceral thing. And you can make music with the guitar, you can play by ear at the piano and write songs and sing melodies, and you don't need to know a whit about written music. But when you're writing for ensembles and the orchestra, it's a very complex task, and it's really easy to get sucked into what do you think about a piece of music, as opposed to how does that piece of music make you feel.
Yeah.
And so I always encouraged my students, if they're writing an obligato or writing a melody, sing it. How does it feel when you actually sing those notes in that succession, rather than relying on your intellect to try to justify which note? And there is a threshold that you will reach. It's, if you are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, you know, the 10,000 hour rule, which in his opinion, there's no, you know, talent is nothing than addiction to hard work. And there is certainly truth to that. And I can tell you, I can recall the instant that a light switch flipped in me, where I was struggling to understand how to do all this stuff. And it's like maybe a 4 or 5 level jigsaw puzzle or tic-tac-toe, where you're trying to juggle all these different elements simultaneously. And I vividly recall the moment I got an assignment and I put it on the desk and I was going to sit down, and I looked at the paper and said, why am I making this so difficult? It was really quite amazing. So you know, you have to put in the time. You have to develop your technique if you're going to do this kind of work, to be able to rekindle your emotional awareness of what it is that you're trying to do. So now when I'm working now on an extended piece for orchestra, I'm more concerned about how does it make me feel while I'm singing this melody or hearing this orchestration or this snippet back to me. If I react emotionally to it, then I'm doing the right thing. And
is that the one that you just sent it to me to?
Yes.
To read. Can you talk a little bit about it? Because I really, when I started reading, it took me maybe an hour to read, and I listened to the excerpt that you sent it to me. And after, I just wanted more. And you were able to develop one thing that it's so important in artistry, is to not lose your audience. In fact, I didn't know what to expect. And as I read, I became more and more interested, and at the end, I wanted more. So, can you talk about the?
Yeah, well, that's. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm a new writer. I had a personal experience a couple of years ago, which I don't need to get into specifics, but it was a terrifying, traumatic experience with another person. And I developed symptoms of PTSD from that experience, from that traumatic experience. And I decided that I had two goals. Number one was I wanted to write a piece for the concert hall because I'd never done that before. And I needed a story. And then I realized that I could use my storytelling skills with music to be able to illustrate the emotional lives of trauma sufferers. Because from personal experience, the moment you start talking about that traumatic experience, you relive the event as a sufferer. And that is hugely important to understand as somebody who doesn't suffer, because there's this big gap of awareness in terms of what drives that kind of behavior. So I said, okay, I can write a concert piece, a piece of music, and then to illustrate the emotional lives of PTSD or trauma sufferers, and tell their story in music to illustrate or to make people who don't suffer aware of what's going on inside of people who don't express themselves. Well, that kind of morphed into a much bigger event than I had originally intended. It's now, I wrote a script. It's kind of a hybrid between a theatrical play and a movie and an orchestral piece. So this is now going, it's intended to be a 60-minute concert event with an original film and actors on stage. And I wrote the script, and now I'm deep into writing music to accompany that script, and then we'll get into shooting the film later this year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And talking about movies and films and music, I think Andrea is behind stage, and I would love to hear The Color Purple, because that's one of my favorite. I just love that movie, and I just love the music that we wrote, Champagne Train. If Andrea could just put a snap of that would be great. I don't think we can hear. Andrea, we cannot hear the music. I think it's on, but it's not broadcasting. And we tried this on Monday, and it worked. Well, maybe later we can hear that. But it's one of the most beautiful music. And this is your composition, am I right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I can pull it up here.
Yeah, but I don't know if we are able to.
Okay. Well, so the story behind The Color Purple is Stephen bought the book, the film rights to, or excuse me, Quincy bought the film rights to the book. And then he talked Spielberg into directing it. And so then they went out and they made, they shot the movie. And, Quincy wanted an African score, and Stephen wanted John Williams, but John Williams wasn't going to do it. And so they went round and round and round about the creative direction for the score. And Stephen went out, and now it's late October, and they had a release date on Christmas Day. So now we're looking at 7 weeks to write a 2-hour film score. And so what ended up happening was Quincy wrote the themes with Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie and Jeremy Lubbock. And then he put a team together, which was really novel at the time. This is late 1985. Now it's done all the time. But at that moment, it was unheard of to assemble a team of writers to be able to work on one score. At the moment, at that time, it was just, the composer was expected to do everything themselves. So I didn't write the themes, but I was given a cue sheet and told, use this theme here, use this theme there.
You composed.
Yeah. And the other thing that was really wild about that particular project, there's a lot of things, that's just kind of working with Quincy is that way. It's always new, it's always forward thinking, and the synth technology developing rapidly. Because, in the old days, a director would come over to the composer's house and the composer would play a theme on a piano, and then they, that's great, and they show up on the scoring session, and then they hear the orchestration for the first time. In this particular instance, Quincy had to preview all the themes for Spielberg before we got to the session, as a way of kind of keeping everything on on the track. So Quincy called them Polaroids. Now they're referred to as mock-ups, which is using a synthesizer to create a demonstration of what that music is. But that was the very first film that ever used that kind of technology.
Well, I have it here. Let's see if I can. I could hear this the whole time. In fact, I many times I just heard that.
Really?
And I would put and listen to it because I'm a very, I'm kinesthetic. And so I am what I hear, sometimes I feel it, and it's physical. And when I hear that, it just gives me a sense of peace, in a sense of, in Portuguese, we say saudosismo, like you are missing something, and it just brings good memory.
Have you seen the film?
Yes, many times.
So that particular music is when Celie finally leaves Mr.
Yep.
And so this is a montage sequence where she's on a train leaving home.
It's the hope of new life.
Yeah.
And that remembrance of the old and the new. And anyway, it's beautiful. Now, let's talk about from the time that you started writing to get where you compose and worked with Quincy Jones and Steven Spielberg. And here you are with Emmy Awards, as you say, half a dozen.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. And I love the picture of Michelle's head on one of them.
Yeah.
Tell me, how do you think that there was, how can I say this, that sometimes the path is done for us. We just, as you said, we need to work hard and get through the path that was already established for us.
That's just, I wouldn't know. You you'd have to ask somebody else. But my goal was to always be making music. That was all I was really interested in. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that it allowed me to escape interpersonal issues that I really had a hard time dealing with. Ill-equipped, maybe is a better way of stating it. And so it really didn't matter to me what it was, as long as it was musical. Now, as far as my career path goes, probably meeting my mentor at age 17 was the turning point for me. Yeah. Because he was really, really busy at the time. And he thought very highly of me, and I was a scared little kid, and so I kept my mouth shut and just tried to do what he told me to do. And it wasn't until about 15 years later that I realized that I had placed my trust in the right person, because virtually everything that he had told me was true. And it saved me all sorts of time of trial and error trying to figure it out by myself. So in terms of like how gigs happened and this, that, or the other thing, I was kind of shot out of a cannon, and it was either you sink or swim. And talking about Quincy, Billy Byers and Johnny Mandel were lifelong friends, and they had both known Quincy forever, since the early 50s. And I remember picking up the phone, the landline, picking up the phone and saying hello, and on the other end there's this voice that says, "Hey man, it's Quincy." And I thought, oh, okay. So he needed help on The Wiz with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, and so I said, sure, I'll come help you out. So I hang up the phone, and not 2 minutes later, the phone rang again, and it was Johnny Mandel, who said, "Has Quincy called you yet?" And I said, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with him." And he said, "Oh, damn, I want you to work for me this week." Now, for those of you who may not know the name Johnny Mandel, he wrote The Shadow of Your Smile. He wrote the theme to MASH. He just recently passed away, but he was a legendary composer, arranger. And he was the reason that I met Johnny through Billy Byers, and Johnny introduced me to Quincy. There's another little cute story about Billy lived in Malibu, and I was going to school in Northridge, in Cal State Northridge in San Fernando Valley. And on Sundays, I would drive out to Billy's place in Malibu and try to study, which was kind of a lost cause, and then end up having dinner with his family, and he had younger children. So I was like the older nephew coming home from college for the weekend. And I would show up with something I was working on and have Billy give notes, right? So what do you think about this? Da, da, da. And so I brought out this arrangement after just wearing out more than one cassette of the score to the Sandpiper, which is Johnny Mandel's score. And so I tried to write something like Mandel. All the stuff that I had been listening to, I tried to incorporate it and work it into this piece I was writing. So after dinner, unannounced, they were neighbors, Johnny walks in the door, and he and without saying a word, Billy had already looked at the arrangement of the piece. He handed Johnny the score and said, "Here, take a look at this." So Johnny takes my score. Now I'm just like sweating bullets, saying, here's my idol going to be looking at this piece of work where I'm trying to be like him, right? So Johnny laid down on the couch. He puts the score up above his head, and he's reading through my chart, and he puts it down, and all he said was, "Gee, it looks like something I would have liked to have written."
Wow, that's a compliment.
And I was maybe 19 at the time. And so, I found in life that you can't force these kinds of relationships, these events. All you can do is be aware.
I think
when
also
the opportunity exists.
Well, when those people kind of, you have a mentor and they embrace you, they recognize talent. Although, you know, I'm very iffy about talent. I think it's hard work. You probably spend hours just learning things and
Oh
writing.
boy. Well,
Yeah.
I still do. It's still hard work. But, you know, I love doing it, so I don't mind putting in the hours.
Yeah. I have a lot of students that tell me, oh, you can just sit and play. I said, honey, no. I mean, there were many hours of learning. I want to talk about your arrangements because this is an arrangement. And again, I'm just, there are so many. And this is Andrea Bocelli. And this is, I don't know what in here.
Yeah.
Canto solamente insieme a pochi amici. Quando ci troviamo a casa e abbiamo bevuto, non pensare che ti abbiamo dimenticato. Proprio ieri sera parlavamo di te. Camminando verso casa mi sei tornata in mente. A letto mi son girato e non ho detto niente. E ho ripensato alla tua voce così fresca e strana, che dava al nostro gruppo qualcosa di più.
I just love it. I found your website, and this is a website that he has, and it's Chris Boardman Media Group, and there's all sorts of works that you have, your bio and everything. And I catch myself, I like to walk in the neighborhood, and I catch myself listening to I just bring it with me.
You're so sweet.
No, there is one thing for sure, which I can recognize good and bad. And I just love listening to good music and good arrangements. And you are excellent.
Well, thank you.
I must tell you this, and please, this is a funny story. When we first met,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at Kathy's house, you approached me and you said, yeah, you know, we talked about the music that I had played and all that because I had given a recital there at her house. And then you said, you know, I'm a musician too. And I kind of nodded and thought, in Nashville, half of Nashville is So I was, yeah. And then you said, you know, I write music. And I'm thinking, yeah, the other half is writers too. Yeah. And then you started talking. And then I realized who you were.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my, I better listen to him. And then I realized that the music that I had listened, you were right there with me. And you were the one, you know, and I kept thinking, I can talk to you the whole night, the whole day, the whole week. And I'm learning. And that's how I feel whenever I talk to you. This is the second time I'm interviewing you. The first time students and faculty, that was for Mississippi State convocation. And they were just crazy about you. And we still would like to have you back because, you know, we have lots of students that would like to be under your wing, and we're still working on that. But
I just let me know.
Yeah. And I just love talking to you because you're so unassuming, so humble in all that you've done. But I still want to ask you a quick question, or maybe be so quick. Because you've worked with Shirley MacLaine, Barbra Streisand, Steven Spielberg, Tom Jones, Quincy Jones, Josh Groban, and all those people. And is there anybody that you would say I can pretty much read her or his mind when I write the music? Because there are certain musicians that you kind of bond, that there is a implied conversation that doesn't happen sometimes.
That's a really interesting question. that's kind of what I get paid to do, because every artist, every situation is different. And part of the job that I do, especially like that last track, for example, I mean, the truth of the matter is that David Foster had recorded the track and done the vocal with Tony Reyes. And he built the track, and he was scuffling. David was having a hard time coming up with a string part for that kind of music, because that was not necessarily his thing. And so he called me up, and I went out to see him at his studio, and he, in a rare bit of humility, he said, I'm not really sure what to do with this. So I said, well, roll the tape. So roll the tape, and I basically ad-libbed the string part first time hearing it. And that was because I was in tune with what his taste and his sensibilities are, as opposed to serving my own personal needs, right? So, and it doesn't really matter what kind of music that I've done. When you're a work for hire guy, that's just part of the job, because you're there to service somebody else's creative intent, as opposed to like this piece that I sent you the MP3 of that I'm working on for this concert piece. That's for me. It's not for anybody else, but like I say, I work for hire. I used to jokingly say to my film scoring students, I says, get over any pretension that you may have about how brilliant you are. Writing film music is kind of like moving furniture. You bring in the couch and you put it on this wall, and you say, well, what do you think? And then the buyer would say, well, yeah, that's kind of, could you try it on the other wall? And you have to pick up the sofa and you move it to the other wall until they're satisfied with what you have to offer. So it's like, again, that's just a skill that I developed over time, trying to be sensitive to people, to be able to understand what they want. Now, there are certain people in life where you just can complete other people's sentences.
Yeah.
And Michael Kamen was that way. Michael and I had a very tight emotional and musical friendship. Felt that way with Quincy when I worked with him. But it's not necessarily something that I sought out. It's like, you do this for a while. You have to be a professional to be able to keep working and understand what the job is. It's not for people to say, oh, aren't you brilliant? No, it's for them to say, I love it because it fits what I'm looking for. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. I was one time invited to last minute thing to play for the first African American baritone for the Metropolitan, Simon Estes. Simon was invited to come here and lecture in 1 month. Like in 4 days, I got a call and said, we need a pianist, and it's you. I said, oh, well, in 5 days, I have a concert with the orchestra here. I'm busy. No, you're not. You're playing for him. At the time, I was an assistant professor, so I had to do it.
Yeah, of course.
And I would have done it anyway. And I'm thinking, my goodness, this is a guy that worked for the Met. And okay, what is it? So I got the scores, the orchestra reduction, all arias, opera. That's what he knew. And we were going to meet once the day before the performance. And I thought, okay, if I know well the score, the music, we will go through it. Well, he didn't sing because he was in his 70s. So he just marked, well, here I do, and then you come in. Okay, now if I have voice, then I'll do the repeat. If not, I'll move on. You follow me. And man, I was with my eyes on him, my ears, everything I could, and I was playing for him. And at the end, everything went well, but he looked at me and said, it was easy to work with you. But as you said, you are not there for yourself, you are there for the other person, and you open a channel.
That's the amazing thing about music in general. And I think I remarked about your playing at Kathy's house, where if you can take your mind out of the performance and then just allow yourself to be in that moment, music has the ability to change the entire dynamic of the room.
Yes.
And I felt that with your performance. I remember I mentioned it to you.
Yes, you did.
And that's what's really required. And maybe it's one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated towards jazz, because jazz is definitely that way, where you have to be in tune with everything around you in that moment to be able to respond in kind.
And you get so sensitive of it, because when you approached me and mentioned that, you kind of levitated when you, and I look at you and I said, how did you know that? It's always so wonderful talking to you. But we have many kids, young musicians, that they wish to be in your place right now. And I want you to tell them, if there's anything that they can do or they should do.
Sure. I mean, in terms of like where to focus their energy and their attention.
Yes.
I'm an old school guy. I'm finally accepted I'm a senior citizen, even though I don't think of myself that way. But when I was a kid, when I was in school, I was working and hanging out with the previous generation. Everybody that I was working with and exposed to in a professional level were all 40, 45 years old or older. And so I got a glimpse into what made them go, what made them special. And so now I'm kind of, all I can tell you is this is kind of focuses on where we sit in the world today, and my view on what the importance of music and art is in today's world, as opposed to, do what I say and you'll be a big star. That doesn't necessarily relate to where we are in world history at this moment. But I can say with complete conviction that we need art more today than ever before. And so as far as focusing your energy and moving forward is, you can talk about the business, how do I get a job, how do I support myself? Well, that's all well and good. But my friend Bob Resman, a record producer, he did 9 Inch Nails and Aerosmith and The Wall with Pink Floyd. And he would constantly get inundated with young people who wanted to become stars, wanted him to make them famous. And the first question he asked them, which I've heard this from more than one person, including my mentor, says, "Will you die if you don't do this?" And that usually makes people jump back a little bit. They're not necessarily expecting something as abrupt as that. But he would say, if the answer is anything but yes, then he would say, don't waste my time. Right? So you have to have that level of commitment to it, but also understand that music is about communicating to other people. And it's that message. And in my case, I tend to write, pretty music. That's just who I am. But that's what's unique to me. That's where I put my energy. That's what I believe in, even though I didn't for many years. And that message is to say that art can connect people. And in today's world, we need that more than ever. My lifetime in the 20th century was all about being an expert and being a cog in somebody else's wheel. Nobody really quite knows exactly what the business models of the future are going to be. So it's I think it's kind of nonsensical to focus on how do I make a living when you have no idea what kind of business is going to support it or not. But that shouldn't deter the artistic, passionate person from saying, I want to use my gifts, my abilities, my uniqueness to be able to use that talent and music to connect other people to one another, to have a shared experience, as opposed to having a solo experience, which we've all kind of drifted into because of, devices now play such a huge role in our lives. So, moving forward, I can't give you any hard and fast advice about this business model, that business model, go Hollywood, go to New York, go, who knows? I can't. I would be lying to you. I can't do that. But what I can say is focus on making art and connecting people. And then all the rest of this stuff will kind of flow from that. And my mom, she used to say, don't worry about the money, do what you love and the money will come. No, it didn't make any sense to me when I was a kid, but and probably your students probably feel the same way because they've got all these pressures and we're in such a crazy state at the moment. But now is the time to grab the reins and push forward with this notion of I want to use art to connect people to make the world a better place. And that will be so unique that people will respond to it in a different way. And the chances are they'll have no idea why they're even there.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. I think that art in general, it's necessary in this society, in any society, especially now.
Well, I mean, we get into a whole other sociological discussion about this, about how island cultures use dance and song to tell stories of their past, to keep their culture alive. I look at it from, the internet is all brand new, and it's the technology will win at the end of the day. It always does. But we've been telling stories as human beings for thousands upon thousands of years. There's no reason to assume that is going to stop. The only thing that's going to change is how those stories are presented.
Yes.
So, as far as advice, tell great stories that are reflective of the world that you live in and become a mouthpiece for the people who have no voice.
And you learn from listening to others, and as you said, your mentors. I'm a firm believer that you have to have mentors. You have to have somebody to believe in you, and you believe in them and learn from them. And that's what I had in my entire life, and I still have those that.
Well, we all need to have people to confide in, people who will be honest with you. Yeah. And the reality is, the master, journeyman, apprentice method has been around as long as people have been telling stories.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to assume that that's no longer needed.
Yeah. Chris, I always enjoy talking to you, and can you believe that an hour has passed already? I just
amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. You are amazing, and I just would like to thank you for all the information you gave us. Your music, which is amazing. Your music is amazing. And I always enjoy talking to you because I always learn, and that's my goal. If I can learn one thing a day, I always will feel like I'm improving.
That's something really important to mention, is that there's no substitute for being curious, right? And I've just turned 67 years old last week, 2 weeks ago. I've been playing the piano for 63 years. And I've been writing music consistently for 53 years. Mm. And I still learn something every time I sit down. It's something new. So be curious. This is a journey. This is a process. This is not a destination. And the one thing, it'll have its ups and downs, and it doesn't make for great relationships and marriages. But one thing I will promise you is that you will have an incredibly rich life and get the biggest bang for your buck. I mean, the close with what Whoopi Goldberg once asked on a talk show, asked Quincy, you publish a magazine, you own TV stations, you own a record label, you're a recording artist, you produce records, you do all this stuff. How do you find time for it all? And his response was, well, I got 28,000 days, and I'm not going to waste one of them.
There you go.
So.
There you go. Yeah, I want to thank you again for this opportunity.
Anytime.
I hope to see you soon. I really
too.
do. And I hope to continue our conversations. And if you finish your score, I would love to hear that music.
Oh, it'll get finished. It'll get finished. One thing I do want to mention, there's, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, I do teach online courses.
Yes, you do.
And the URL for the online for the courses is chrisboardmancourses.com. And I have written a memoir, which was planned to be published later this year. And there is on a URL to a landing page where you can sign up for an advanced copy to get a notification when it's published.
And where is that? Where is that
At
link?
chrisboardmancourses.com.
Courses.com. Okay,
Right.
So this is Chris Boardman courses, all in one word.
Right.
.com.
And it encapsulates, I mean, I do a fair amount of public speaking, the online teaching, as well as the book. And, I have a big appetite. So there's.
You have developed it. We didn't even touch that. With that, you have developed a completely online course.
Yeah, when I taught at the University of Miami, I rewrote the entire undergraduate commercial music program, which I own. So, but that's for another conversation.
Oh, well, I hope to have you back, okay? Because I'm going to interview musicians in English once a month. And the same way that I did with Stanley and David, that I wanted to invite them back, I open that invitation to you again. Okay, Chris, you are a wonderful musician, and I admire you. And thank you so much for this interview. You have a great day.
It's my pleasure.
You stay with us, okay? Stay
All
with
right.
us. She's going to say something else, and then we'll come back and talk, the three of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. It was amazing. Chris, before finish, I would like to try one more time because I don't know what happened. And you can choose what we can listen, playback or Mi Mancherai or El Chalet.
Mi Mancherai is just a stunning performance.
Yes,
okay.
it is.
Thank you.
Are we going to cross our fingers?
Yes.
There we go.
Mi mancherai se te ne vai, mi mancherà la tua serenità, le tue parole come canzoni al vento, e l'amore che vai, se te ne vai, ora e per sempre non so come vivrei, e l'allegria, amica mia, va via con te, mi mancherai, perché vai via, perché l'amore in te si è spento, perché non cambierà niente, lo so, e dentro sento te. Mi mancherai, perché vai via, perché l'amore in te si è spento, per te, perché non cambierà niente, lo so, e dentro sento che mancherà l'immensità dei nostri giorni e notti insieme noi, i tuoi sorrisi quando si fa buio, la tua ingenuità da bambina, mi mancherai, amore mio, mi guardo e trovo un vuoto dentro me. E l'allegria, amica mia, va via con te.
Wow. Beautiful, amazing. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. It was amazing.
Amazing. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. Muito obrigada pela presença de todos. Realmente é uma música muito emocionante. Agradecemos, não temos palavra para agradecer o Chris Boardman por nos trazer tanta inspiração, tanto talento, e que ele possa ter muito sucesso por muito tempo. Obrigada a todos vocês. Esse é um projeto da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas da Universidade Federal de Goiás, juntamente com a Reitoria Digital e a Mississippi State University. Nós temos o apoio da Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, do Centro de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, do Centro de Estudos Brasileiros da UFG, da Rádio Universitária e da Rádio Brasil Central FM. Muito obrigada e até a próxima sexta.